Hi guys, this is Jessica doing a video for you today on drama. So not exactly acupuncture related, but I've been delving into this myself lately and I feel like it's so valuable. And I think that our relationships with other people and the ways that we interact with people have such a huge impact on our health that I kind of wanted to do a video today about the Karpman Drama Triangle. So this is the title of the video, How to Have Less Drama Inside and Out. I'm debating if I'm going to split this into two parts. It'll be dependent on how long it takes to get through it, but the first part is going to be very clearly illustrating the three aspects of the Karpman Drama Triangle. So you can see the perpetrator, rescuer, victim. I'm going to go into those dynamics and how they show up in human relationships. And then I'm going to talk about the pros and cons to drama, why people engage in drama. And then at the end of the video, which might be its own separate video, depending on time, I'm going to go into kind of ways that you can cut drama in your own life and kind of get out of this not great dynamic with other people. So first of all, I'll just explain. So the Karpman Drama Triangle, basically this is a way that people interact, and any sort of exchange that's on the Karpman Drama Triangle can be within these three dynamics: the perpetrator, the rescuer, or the victim. And they're all kind of commingled, so they all interact with one another in a variety of ways. So the victim has like a poor me mentality. The victim feels that the world and others acts upon them. They're upset about injustice in the world, or this could also be like a past injustice, something that somebody did to them. And oftentimes victims are real recipients of bad behavior in others, or it could be criminal activity, criminal behavior. They often are recipients of genuinely harmful actions of other people. But what makes them into more the victim in the Karpman Triangle is that they don't just experience bad things from others, they stay in that, and it creates an identity for them. So the victim judges other people often for not having the same ethical code, values, or behaviors as they do. So if somebody is chronically in victim mode, they can feel like just other people existing and being different and having different preferences than they do. They act like other people are acted upon them. So kind of the neuroses of the victim mentality is not the reality of what somebody has experienced, but more it then becomes a world perception, and other people then fill these roles for them with that world perception and story. So these people, they often feel powerless, they feel like a pawn in other people's games. They view themselves as deficient, lacking, and powerless. They cope through life through sadness and helplessness. So those are general ideas. And then the perpetrator very much views life as dog eat dog. They judge others, but whereas the victim judges others and gets a sense of moral superiority to others, the perpetrator often feels superior to others when it comes to strength, status, kind of being top dog in a way. So they judge others by being weak, pathetic, or deficient. They use aggression and anger to cope in life. They have black and white thinking. There's winners or losers. They justify their bad behavior to others, kind of, with that dog eat dog thinking, like they feel like if they don't do something negative to somebody else, then it's going to be done to them. So it's basically like a me or you scenario. So they feel inclined to continue to perpetuate that with other people. They often feel victimized by normal challenges / other people existing. So the rescuers is a third part of the Karpman Triangle. They judge others to be deficient, incapable, and helpless. So they feel like they are kind of the know-it-all, the know-all, be-all, like they are the authority on certain things. This could be religious, it could be in a workplace setting, it could be in a variety of different ways interpersonally, but rescuers often judge themselves as the expert and other people as the incapable Padawan or grasshopper. And instead of responding with aggression, they go into savior mode. They use this, so obviously, being a helper or helping other people isn't necessarily a bad thing. Where it becomes toxic in the Karpman Triangle is where rescuers aim to foster dependence. So they want the people that they rescue to need them. It's kind of like, do you teach a man to fish or do you get him a fish a day? Rescuers are fishing for other people rather than having faith in other humans that they can take care of themselves, or teaching them or giving them tools. So they're not empowering others, but rather they're keeping others disempowered by taking on responsibility that isn't theirs. And they use this to feel important, superior, or gregarious, and they use concern and worry for others to avoid their own problems. So we'll go on to the perks of drama. So the perks of drama, I would say that the main perk to drama is that it prevents you from taking responsibility for yourself and your own life. So each of the three in the triangle all are avoiding responsibility. The perpetrator is blaming others for their issues, their bad feelings in life, what have you. The victim is also blaming others for their bad feelings, but more from a moralistic perspective, like that they are, if only everybody saw the world the way that I see it, then like the world would be a better place. Versus like perpetrators are more just like, F this guy, screw that guy, or whatever. So another perk to drama is that it provides excitement. It can be adrenalizing. It can be a way of almost creating this like faux closeness with people. If people don't know how to genuinely connect, then it can provide kind of the semblance of connection. A perk can be that it's familiar. It could be the way that we grew up. It could have been very present in our home environment that we grew up in a variety of different ways. It can be familiar. Another perk to drama is that it serves as a distraction from deeper underlying feelings. So it's very easy to get caught up in kind of these surface levels. Oh my gosh, Tony said this, Betsy did that, what's Bob doing with his life? It's kind of like a way of keeping ourselves on the surface a little bit instead of delving deeper into. I'll give, a small example. I think the examples would be really useful in this kind of scenario. Say that there's a husband and wife, and the husband goes grocery shopping and didn't get his wife her favorite foods that he obviously knows that she likes because they've been married for many years. So he comes home and she gets very, very upset about him not getting the foods that she wanted. This can serve as kind of a distraction because what's the deeper underlying issue is that she doesn't feel cared about, and there's grief there around her marriage. So the deeper underlying emotion gets kind of skimmed over. And I think that the common think the common way that this is called is like nothing fights. If you guys have heard like couples having nothing fights in the store, you know, that's a really good example of how drama serves us, that we can kind of focus on these day-to-day small issues instead of addressing underlying issues, whereas like underlying issues may be going beneath the rug a bit. So then it's also a way of manipulating others and gaining a false sense of control, because part of the dynamic in the Karpman Triangle is that whenever one person is on one end of the triangle, it almost forces the other people into the other roles. So if somebody comes up to you and they just start, you know, cussing you out or whatever, then all of a sudden you're put into the victim role where you're like, what's wrong with this person? Why are they acting this way? Like you go into a sense of you feel morally superior to them, being like, well, I'd never yell at somebody on the street. Like, so why are they doing that? So then it automatically puts you into that role. Or, you know, if somebody approaches you and they're like, oh, I'm just like really so down on my luck and, you know, everything's been so bad in my life, then they're trying, well, I mean, we're never forced into a role. We always have, you know, free will and any sort of interaction that we have with somebody, but that's like kind of the way that the energy wants to move, because of that's what the person is trying to bring about, whether consciously or subconsciously. So the person that is approaching you down on their luck, you know, they're trying to be rescued. They want somebody else to go into rescuer mode. So that's like a way that we all get kind of the perks to drama. So the downsides to drama. There are a lot of downsides. So first of all, it's very draining. All three of those roles puts you in a situation where it's very draining. As a victim, it can feel very draining to be so upset and feel put upon by others. As a persecutor, it's very draining to constantly be feeling like angry and blaming others. And as a rescuers often, you know, on the unhealthy form of the rescuers, they often don't actually have a true sense of their own boundaries and needs. So they're going to be overdoing it for other people. So drama distracts from your purpose. You know, I truly believe that each of us is here on the earth for a reason. We're supposed to be sharing something, whether it's creatively. I think that every single person on this planet is meant to create something, whether it's like a blueprint for a house or, you know, create a family, write a book. I think that we're all creators, and the more energy that you spend in the Karpman Drama Triangle, it's really just kind of like a whirlpool. It's just gonna suck your life force. Also, it's a barrier to genuine connection and love. It pushes people away. People who engage in the rescuer part of the triangle can push people away because they can come off as very overbearing and condescending. And smothering. People on the perpetrator part obviously push people away because people don't like feeling judged, criticized, blamed, and generally have like aggression put upon them. And then victims also push people away because it's not necessarily a very attractive quality for people to be feeling very sorry for themselves and feeling that other people are out to get them, or government systems or a school system. It can be just not as fun for people to engage with that, unless they often find people that are in kind of similar vibe that are other victims. But even then, it's not necessarily a true, very genuine connection. So ultimately, all of these create more suffering. You know, I like to say that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. It can very much contribute to mental health issues, especially when you're in a situation like the victim and the perpetrator, where the perpetrator is actually kind of pretty abusive. That's 100% going to negatively affect our relationship with ourself. So all three of these negatively affect our relationship with ourself. Being in a victim mode, you feel disempowered, you feel that you can't get your needs met, so that's going to negatively impact the way that you view yourself. The rescuer gets a negative self-concept because, one, they feel like they need others to depend on them in order to be valuable, and two, they, like I said, they often don't have a great sense of their own boundaries, so there can be this underlying resentment, or they're not honoring their own boundaries because they feel very obligated to others. So it ultimately creates more suffering, contributes to mental health issues. It also can definitely create, their self-fulfilling prophecies. So if you view yourself in an identity where very much humans are very prone to confirmation bias. So if you have a belief about yourself, like everybody's always getting down on me, or, other people are unfair towards me, or, I'm a loser, or, oh, I never win anything, or I never get what I want in life. Like, those are all stories and beliefs, and then that's basically going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you're going to view situations in that light through that filter. You're going to discount evidence to the contrary, hyper-focus on evidence that supports your confirmation bias. So all three of these, the rescuer is going to find people that are incompetent and can't take care of themselves. The perpetrator is going to find people that are weak and obnoxious and pathetic. The victim is going to find people that are going to perpetrate, and be aggressive and mean. So then, and another huge downside to drama is that it solidifies trauma in the system. If there's any sort of relational trauma, it's often that you're just going to be, continuing to to promote this over and over and over again in your life. It's hard to get out of that loop when you're continuing to engage in a lot of drama. And, the final way that it's a downside is that it just hurts other people. Like, from any spectrum on the triangle, it hurts people, whether it's hurting yourself or hurting other people. I have the image of the daughter in getting in between the couple. It's like there's so many casualties when it comes to drama, and there's so many collateral damage, you could say. It's almost a type of psychological warfare that happens between humans. It's just on a much smaller scale than you would see in a country or whatever. So there's always going to be collateral damage, whether it's the kids, maybe even the pets that are around, that have to be around the fighting. It could be other family members, in a workplace scenario. If there are certain colleagues that are not getting along, then that's going to negatively impact the whole team. We're all very connected with one another, and our actions reverberate out. So a huge downside to drama is that it creates negative atmosphere. It creates a toxic environment, whether it's home, work, what have you. So yeah, it can be really harmful. Okay. And then upsides to living a drama-free life. 1, you have more energy and time for joy. 2, you can be more in tune with your intuition. So a lot of times the drama creates a lot of noise. It's almost like this wind, like you're out in a storm. It becomes very hard to hear the smaller, quieter voice of our intuition. And that intuition is often really going to guide us right in terms of relationships or life path, or just whatever variety of situation that we find ourselves in. Intuition is super important, and it's really hard to access intuition when our mind is very stormy or busy. So the drama serves as a distraction from intuition. Another perk is that peace and lack of stress like help mental health. I mean, this is kind of pretty intuitive, but so when we have more peace in our life, I think that people underestimate how much that actually changes our neurochemistry. And stress affects us neurologically for months. If you go through a really stressful month, your brain is still recovering that for up to 6 months afterwards. These events have actual, real, tangible, negative effects on the body and on the brain. And it can become very hard to have a healthy functioning neurotransmitter system in our brain, have the right levels of dopamine that we're absorbing, have the right levels of serotonin that we're absorbing, have the right levels of dopamine, serotonin, just experiencing a lot of different neurochemicals in the body that are going to contribute to health and happiness. So stress definitely plays a role in imbalancing you from a chemical perspective. And then, when you're not living in as much trauma, you connect with others much more easily. And then it's like you create these genuine connections based on love and respect and curiosity and just being interested in somebody. People often have a mode for which they prefer, and that means that they need others to play a role as well. So we touched on that earlier in the video. People often manipulate an exchange to end up in this position, often by switching at some point. This is a form of manipulation. I'm going to share a couple personal examples of this. So for one, I had a patient in my practice that came in, she wasn't sleeping. Really, really bad insomnia. And, I was literally just going down the list with her of like, okay, what's your nighttime routine like? What's your sleep hygiene like? And she just was like, no, everything's perfect. Everything's absolutely perfect. I'm doing everything 100% right. And I was like, okay, well, have you tried these supplements? She's like, yes, of course I've tried those supplements. Have you been on sleeping meds? Yes, of course I've been on sleeping meds. And so then I'm like, well, have you tried breath work, meditation? Like, I'm like pulling everything out, everything in my toolbox. I'm like, I'm trying to help this person. And then by the end of it, I don't remember exactly what happened, but she got very snippety with me. And she was like, anyone could read about this on the internet. Like, kind of implying that I didn't really know anything, or like, oh, like these are really like simplistic solutions that you've suggested. Like anyone could find this on Google, or whatever. So that's an example of like, she's coming in supposedly as the victim of poor me, I can't sleep. And then me as a less experienced practitioner was jumping in, maybe as a rescuer. I mean, I don't think it was necessarily unhealthy rescuer, because when someone comes in my clinic, they're asking me for help and I am using my expertise, and not overextending myself. But how I would do that differently if somebody were to come in, before I switch to that thought. So this person wanted to be in the persecutor role. She wanted to be in the role of other people are incompetent, other people are weak. And so even though there was this power differential in my clinic where I'm technically have more power in the space, she managed to flip that by being like, oh, you must not know very much, since I've already tried all these things and that they haven't worked. And coming at it from a slightly like condescending or aggressive way was kind of the way that she was talking to me by the end. So that's an example of like the switch. So people often have a preferred mode that they want to be in, but obviously most people aren't going to interact with somebody if they're necessarily in that preferred mode. So they kind of have to like play a little bit of a game. So the game was, she's coming in asking for help, but not really wanting help. Like she doesn't really want to be helped. So yeah, me as a more experienced practitioner at this point, I would probably pause. Like if I made a couple suggestions and somebody's like, no, 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 me now, I would probably pause and get a little bit curious and be like, oh, well, and maybe just go into listener mode of like, well, how's that affecting you? And, just let them kind of get like a taste for their experience with this instead of necessarily trying to help them, because I have realized from years of doing this that people are not going to be helped if they don't want to be helped. And they're also, they might want to be helped, but if you don't do it in the right way or suggest the right thing, they're also not going to be receptive to that. So I won't go into too much of explanation there. I'll try and explain other kind of switches that I could think of. I definitely have known people that, for example, will jump in and try to be really helpful. Okay, here's like a small example. I was I was going to host a family gathering for a holiday. I think it was Christmas. And a family member hopped in without me asking. I didn't need help, but they hopped in and they're like, oh, well, I'm going to come 3 hours before this event and help you get everything ready. And, whatever that entailed. And then, when they arrived, it turned into sort of like a complaining session. Like they actually wanted sympathy and to have their pain kind of held space for in that situation. So in that instance, like the helping was actually kind of a ruse, because what they really wanted was for me to be in the helper mode and for them to be in the victim mode. So there's just a lot of different instances like that. You could also think of, it's a really dark example, but like a school shooter that then at the end kills himself. It's like they start out as a perpetrator, but then at the end it's like this switch, like poor me. I'm not saying that all of them, that happens necessarily always because of, anyway, it's a really contentious topic, so I won't necessarily go into that too much. Okay, all of these roles serve to create a toxic enmeshment, control, and codependency. They're all coping strategies to deal with an often unpredictable world and the challenging emotions that arise from that. They also create a lot of, you guessed it, drama. So the perpetrator/abuser pushes negativity onto the victim. The victim then feels disempowered and needs to be rescued. The rescuer jumps in to help. And then the toxic relationships can often alternate roles, meaning that you can have a relationship where somebody might have their preferred role, like preferred perpetrator or victim or rescuer, but often the drama triangle kind of lends itself to people flipping, roles. So, like an example of that would be like a spouse complaining about the dishes and getting on the other person's case of like, oh, like you never do dishes, like it's not that hard, like what are you, dumb? You can't like put a bowl in the dishwasher. That would be, they're coming on as perpetrator. And then when the other person gets mad and they were like, well, maybe I was just about to put that bowl in the dishwasher. And then the initial instigator will switch to a victim and be like, oh, well, like I'm so busy with work and I'm so tired when I get home. And so it's like, I just don't understand why you're always like leaving, dishes for me to do. So it's like you can kind of see how the different roles lend themselves to each other. And then possibly the initial victim could come back in as a rescuer and be like, okay, honey, like, I'll do more of the dishes if you need, or I'll start cleaning more, to like rescue in that situation. So I'm going to end there. And the following video, part 2, will be, how do we get out of it? Okay, so thank you so much if you made it to the end. I'm really excited to be sharing this kind of information. I feel like it's super important and super helpful. So thank you for watching, and talk to you guys soon.